come rain, hell, or high water. We're here in studio to bring you your Northern Region news and updates here on this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report, this all-new soggy episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. That's right, we have braved the weather to get here to give you your state championship news here on this state preview edition of the Fairfax Sports Report. Before we get to all that, let's get to the folks that make this show possible, and of course, it's CCI Screen Printing for all your screen printing needs at 703-978-0257 or on the web at www.cciscreenprinting.com. Thanks to Triple Edge Lacrosse, your endless summer of lacrosse can be found at www.tripleedgelax.com. Speaking of the web, we're on the web at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. All new video online, that's right. FSN Fast Breaks are quite popular on the web now. Go check out all your news, notes, audio, video, and updates at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. I'm BJ Kubaroulis, and I want to thank all you folks for joining us for this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. Of course, Paul Frummelt in studio joining me, the bearded one here, ready to drop some Northern Region news and notes. Paul, we're deep into the state tournament. We're going to get to all those previews and more coming up in just a minute. Monica Moore is going to be joining us for our girls lacrosse segment, and we'll get to a whole bunch of other brackets and more. All these brackets can be found at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. But, Paul, before we get to all that, I got some news and notes we want to get to. Of course, Robinson boys basketball coach Matt McCaig steps down, goes to Verina High School in Richmond, leaving an open position there. And a guy that you and I know well, being at Langley, takes the job. Not Travis Hess, but one of his assistants, Brian Nelson, gets the job at Robinson.
Yeah, Brian Nelson, who was brought in by Brian Doyle, who left Langley and now recently left Centerville as the head coach. The assistant principal over at Centerville brought him in 4 years ago as a freshman boys coach. He then, when Doyle left and Hess came in, he jumped up to the head coach of the JV team, became a varsity assistant over there at Langley, and he's been very successful. Obviously, the program has been very successful for the last couple of years, and Nelson decided that when the Robinson job came open, he wasn't just going to go for any job. He liked what the state that Robinson was in. He liked the program. He thought it was similar to Langley and an up-and-coming program at Robinson, so he decided to interview the job, and DSA Mike McGurk told me that his enthusiasm just blew him away. He knew the kids' names. He had the research done, and again, blew him away with his energy, so that's who they hired. 31-17 as Langley's junior varsity coach over the last couple of seasons from upstate New York. Spent some time as a varsity assistant there. So Brian Nelson, your new boys basketball coach at Robinson, dealing with one of the biggest schools in Virginia. He'll have a nice crop to draw from. And speaking of crop to draw from, Drew Murphy could be in the works to come back as a high school basketball coach. We're not sure just yet who will get the open position at Centerville High School, but Drew Murphy, an assistant coach that was at McLean for quite some time as a varsity head coach, came over this past season and was Centerville coach Brian Doyle's assistant. So he seems to be the next logical step as we find out today that Doyle, who took an assistant principal position at Centerville, leaves his job behind. So that's the second opening in Northern Region basketball, both coming from the Concord. Doyle out. Does Murphy look like the next logical step? Well, obviously Doyle, a very well-respected coach in the area, has plenty of descendants, and Murphy became one of them this year, coaching under Doyle, and he looks groomed for the job. Obviously, Murphy's a great coach. He's had success in the Northern Region, so we're not saying who they're going to hire, but we think Murphy's has a good shot. Two Concord jobs. One's already been filled. Another one, Brian Doyle leaves Centerville, and Brian Nelson takes over at Robinson. That's your boys basketball update. We are way out of season, so let's get back to spring on this state championship update here. We are deep in the state tournament. I'm BJ Kubaroulis alongside of Paul Frummelt on this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. And speaking of spring sports, baseball is one of the best here in the Northern Region. Let's jump right into the bracket, and in just a minute, Lake Braddock boys baseball coach Jody Rutherford's going to be joining us to tell us all about his game. They have not gotten a chance to get out of that first game, Lake Braddock and Indian River, at 6-3 there, I believe, in the fourth inning, so it can't be official. This game is now going to be stretched out to tomorrow. That's Thursday. They started playing this on Tuesday. We'll get a chance to talk to
Jody Rutherford from Lake Braddock in just a moment. We're looking at Colonial, Forge, and Cosby. They're also in that kind of mix and trying to get their game in. But some early results: James River beats Albemarle. Bethel takes over Chantilly. So Chantilly on a dream run gets booted in the first round of the state tournament.
That's one thing that we do know is Chantilly will not continue in the state tournament. Obviously, it was a year for first for Chantilly and head coach Kevin Ford. First time they won a Concord district title since Ford was in high school.
Right.
So, and then this is the first time that they advanced to the state tournament by advancing to the Northern Region Final. Obviously, Chantilly losing to Lake Braddock 9-6 in that Northern Region Final, but their season is over, losing to Bethel.
Well, if you want to see more of this bracket and you want to hear Paul Frummel drop some baseball knowledge on you, go to fairfaxsportsnetwork.com and check out Paul's all-new Fast Break. For those of you familiar with the website, you'll know what they are. Go check them out if you haven't seen them yet, and drop us your comments at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Speaking of comments, now we're joined on the FSN hotline by Jody Rutherford to give us his comments on what has been a difficult game to get through. Coach, you're going on your second day of suspension here now in this game. You're on a 6-3 lead right now from a game you started now 2 days ago by the time you get a chance to get it in. How difficult is it as you're sitting here just itching to kind of close this thing out? How difficult is it to sit there and wait to get into this game?
It's tough, but it's really been tough on everybody. I know that one game last night got decided, from what I heard on the bus ride home. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's definitely tough. Kids showing up to the field every day ready to play and find out their fate and whether they'll play another game. So, it's tough on everybody.
And Coach, I want to talk about jump back a game and talk about your second region title in 3 years. And the big play that everybody was talking about after that game was Shane Halley's pop-up that seemed to never come down. And when it did come down, it found grass, ended up being a 3-run double. Tell me what you were thinking on the third baseline as that ball is in the air.
Well, I mean, it was pretty high up there. Looking back at it, I don't think there was a lot of second basemen that would catch that ball, at least high school second baseman, with that kind of pressure in that situation with the bases loaded and the runners running. A little bit of wind, the light poles were kind of low, so the ball was up there for a while. It was just a tough play. I knew, once it reached the top of its ball flight, that it was going to be difficult.
Coach, coming through the season, it seemed like everyone was talking about Oakton with all the talent that they have, and you guys emerge as the top dog out of the Northern Region. Moving forward now, can you play the card of underdog anymore? Can you continue to play that card with your team, or how do you motivate the kids?
I don't necessarily think that we ever really, played the card of the underdog. I think our guys always believed that we were one of the best teams in the region. A lot of the guys I have on this year's team won it a couple years ago. Last year we got a kind of a tough draw running into a tough Madison team, so things didn't really work out there. But this year, I mean, we scrimmage Oakton every year. We scrimmage Madison. We play as tough schedule as we can. We're facing the Mike Kents, and been successful in all this situations. So we feel that we're just as good as everyone we play.
And Coach, when I talked to you after the Chantilly game, when you guys were down, you mentioned that we're just going to keep on grinding out, keep on getting quality at bats, and something's going to happen because your lineup has been hot. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that game plan, just getting those quality at bats in, and good things are going to happen?
Well, I've had a lot of these guys for 3 years, and we work in camps and things of that nature, and work in practice. So you're always trying to teach them some new things. So the thing we really worked on this year was getting yourselves into good counts, and when you do get into a good hitter's count, to be aggressive and know what your zone is, and when you get that pitch, jump on it. If you don't get it, live to see another pitch. And it just seems like the last 2 weeks my guys have really just kind of picked that up and taken off with that approach.
Coach, you're up 6-3 right now on Indian River in a game that's been suspended now by the time you'll get it in for 2 days. And you don't even know if you will be able to get it in now with this weather that's hit us here in Northern Virginia. How do you keep the kids settled, and how do you continue to approach this game, being that you are up 3 runs and just need a couple more innings to get it done?
I have a senior group right now that I really believe that this is, one of the most important things in their lives, with the exception of graduating from high school. This might be the most important thing to them. I don't think they'll take anything for granted. I think they're really focused on trying to win a state championship, and it was one of our goals coming into the season. We talked about winning a certain number of championships, and so far, with the exception of our spring break tournament, we've been able to accomplish all of our goals.
Coach, I think I already know the answer to this. You talked about it with me after the Chantilly game, but going for that 20th win in a row, and you mentioned that you guys don't talk about it in the locker room. You don't talk about it in the dugout. Only time you talk about it is when people like me ask you about it. But why not talking about it? Why not embracing the streak?
Every time we take the field, I think we expect to win. And to be honest with you, 15, 20, Madison, I think whatever they're 29-0. Now that's pretty impressive. Whatever their run was, I believe, in 2002. We're just going out and trying to win ball games. We really, really don't talk about that at all.
Well, Coach, good luck to you in this one and the many more that might follow en route to what could be a state championship. Thanks for joining us on the FSN Hotline, Coach Jody Rutherford from Lake Braddock Baseball.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
So, there's a streak, and Paul, you had to go there. Baseball coaches are one of the most superstitious of their kind of coaches, baseball coaches. They don't like to talk about streaks. You got to bring that up?
Well, I also tried to get him to step on the foul line as well, and he hopped right over. No, but seriously, they're playing amazing baseball. I joked about it, I think almost a month ago, saying they hadn't lost since 1982. But it just keeps on going. They're playing great baseball, so we got to talk about this because they're doing something extremely special. And right now, again, it's gotten them their second Northern Region championship in 3 years.
The Bruins win 2 Northern Region championships in the last 3 years and establish themselves as one of the best teams in Virginia. Let's see if they can win a state title and solidify that. When we come back, Monica Moore going to talk with us about girls lacrosse in this upcoming segment of your Triple Edge Lacrosse Report. I'm BJ Kubaroulis alongside of Monica Moore. Every week, you FSN knuckleheads know that Monica drops her lacrosse knowledge. It's no different this week that we're in the state championship tournament. Monica Moore's got some knowledge to bestow upon you Northern Region lacrosse fans. Let's jump into the highlights from what was a fantastic game. And of course, Ashley Kimmener having 9 of those goals. You can see some of those highlights at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com as they overcame Chantilly. She scored another 8 goals in the first round of the state tournament, so 17 goals in 2 games. And we'll jump right into the bracket. Monica Moore, as can the Cougars continue to fight through this bracket and to what could be their 3rd straight state championship? Let's jump right into that bracket.
All right, well, here you see where we stand right now. Of course, the big news, the 2 semifinal games were scheduled for tonight. They have been postponed until tomorrow due to the weather, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a lot to talk about so far with what's happened in the quarterfinal game. So first of all, let's start with Oakton, who was the #1 seed from the Northern Region. They squared off against Forest Park in their quarterfinal matchup, and they won 27-5, a sensational win for them. And as BJ said, Ashley Kimmener picked up right where she left off with her 8 goals and 2 assists. And when Oakton started out the season, they were 4-5, but they have won their last 5 straight. They've been absolutely sensational. And now, since people in the region are pretty familiar with the teams in the Northern Region, I'm going to give you a little bit of a scouting report for this Loudoun Valley team that Oakton is going to be squaring off against tomorrow night. So this Loudoun Valley team is a very young team, but they're really hungry, and they certainly demonstrated that in their quarterfinal matchup against a very good Western Albemarle team. They were down by 1 goal with 1 minute to play. They didn't have the ball, and one of their freshmen, Caitlin McGinn, forced the turnover, giving them back the ball, setting up a goal from Jessie Harkey with 23 seconds to go, sending the game to overtime. Then in overtime, Western Albemarle scored the first goal, But then Loudoun Valley came storming back. They were unbelievable. Both Sophia Swan and Jessica Zakruski scored goals, giving them the win. And I cannot say enough good things about their goalkeeper, Trisha Hicks. She had 12 saves in that game. She is a brick wall. But Oakton has been playing so well that I certainly see them in the final on Saturday.
Oh, Ashley Kimmener, no surprise. She's had such a great career. I mean, she got red carded out of the last state championship. So you know Kimmener wants to get back into that state championship game and hopefully give her team their third straight title. That would really conclude such a great career for the JMU-bound attack. 17 goals in the last 2 games, a 27-5 victory. As we run through the highlights here, Monica Moore of this region championship. Chantilly went up, but Oakton rallied, and this was a game they had lost twice before coming into this game, so they had something to prove.
They definitely did, and Ashley Kimmener talks about that red card a lot. That's in the back of her mind, and I think that guides her every time she's playing, but you can just see number 2 all over your screen. But big news for Chantilly in that game, their big 3, Brittany Grill, Liz Dunwoody, and of course Katie Still were sensational in the Northern Region Final. You cannot take anything away from them, and the big thing about all of those young ladies is they're all upperclassmen, so you're going to see them yet again next year. But of course, they've still got a little more business left to be done in this season. But number 2, over and over again, all night, Ashley Kimmener playing possessed. Of course, this was the game where she had 3 goals in 42 seconds in the second half. She tied it up 7-7, and then went on to score 3 more goals by the end of the game. And so she was just unbelievable. And then, of course, as we said, she's continued her winning ways during the state quarterfinals, continuing to score. I don't know how many goals she's going to have by the end of her high school career, but she has been fabulous. All right, so we've talked about the Oakton-Loudoun Valley matchup tomorrow night. So now let's move on to the other 2 teams that will be playing. So first of all, of course, Chantilly, one of our Northern Region teams, one of the teams that has been on top throughout most of the season until they ran into that roadblock, Oakton. But they squared off against Broad Run in their quarterfinal matchup last Sunday, another game postponed due to the rain. And they started out a little sluggish on Sunday, but they were up during the second half 9-6. And then Katie Stillwell just decided she was going to take over the game. She finished the game with 5 goals. Her teammate Liz Dunwoody had 3 goals, giving Chantilly the 15-8 win, sending them on to the semifinals. And now let's talk a little bit about this team that they're going to be facing, because this is a sensational Albemarle team that is definitely going to cause Chantilly some problems. They have a player on their team, Margaret Moss, who is to Albemarle what Ashley Kimmener is to Oakton.
Wow.
During their region final, she had 6 goals, and in one game this season when they were playing Battlefield, she scored 3 goals in 1 minute and 50 seconds. So this sounds like Ashley Kimmener performances. This Albemarle team, so good. In fact, they're 16-2. Chantilly is 16-2. These teams are so evenly matched. It's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be too close to make the call right now.
They always say it's tough to beat a team 3 times, and they're going to play it all the way through. They could play them 4 or 5 times, and you could have a different output every single time. But it's always the same here in this Girls Triple Edge Lacrosse Report, where Monica Moore drops some knowledge on us every week. I want to thank you, Monica, for joining us. If you want to see more of Monica's report and more about the Northern Region Championship, the state championship, the upcoming bracket, go to fairfaxsportsnetwork.com and check out Monica Moore's all-new Fast Break. When we come back, the boys are coming back to join us, and we're going to talk all about boys lacrosse in this upcoming segment of FSN. Welcome back to this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. I'm your host, BJ Kubarulis, alongside of Paul Frummel of the Connection Newspapers, and also of the Connection Newspapers is Eric Gilmore joining us in studio now. We're going to talk all about lacrosse in just a moment. But before we get to that, guys, we want to talk a little rugby. Kurt Mockenhop is a guy that has been around the rugby scene for quite some time. He actually also does a show about rugby as well, is with the Potomac Rugby Union, is a board member there. And really the reason we're talking to him is because he helped spark a new league called Rugby Virginia, which will be playing for its first state championship. That's this Saturday at South County Secondary School at 3:30 p.m. Mockenhop is a board member with Rugby Virginia. And guys, basically the deal is this. It's not a VHSL sport yet, but it's following the blueprint of lacrosse. Now, lacrosse, as you guys remember, look, 3 years ago was still an obscure, unofficial sport. They were playing state championships, but they didn't really, they weren't sponsored. They weren't official. They're hoping to get with this state-based model where they're having teams that are playing within this league, an 8 8-team league called Rugby Virginia. The hopes is that they will have enough to make school teams. TC Williams is the only school team within the state that actually has all 25 of its members attending the school. So that's kind of where Rugby Virginia hopes it will soon be, to create enough teams, kind of like lacrosse did, so that they can have an official league and an official state championship. This Saturday's meeting between Nova U19 and Western Suburbs. Western Suburbs is from Loudoun County. That is the first official state championship, and first unofficial state championship, and the first step towards making this sport official. With all that said, as you can see at a 3:30 p.m. championship at South County Secondary, that's the matchup. Check it out online. We'll have a story at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. But on the hotline right now is Kurt Mockenhop, who has been part of the local rugby scene for quite some time. Kurt, this is BJ. We got a chance to talk earlier this week all about rugby and in this area. Why don't you go ahead and give our viewers a feel of how big rugby is in the DC metro area?
Hey, BJ. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'd just like to say that rugby is really taken off in our area. The biggest single part of rugby in the area that's growing the fastest is at the high school level and at the college level too, particularly with girls. With Title IX around, there is a rush on to try to get more girls teams to varsity status, both in college and now in high school. And we're starting to see that happen. Part of the mission of Virginia, which is the group hosting the state championship this weekend, is to develop the sport within the state. And we've got 5 game development officers positioned around the state in places like Tidewater, Richmond, Fredericksburg, Charlottesville, and Roanoke to grow this game. And we're not really going to be thinking whether it's with boys, it starts with girls, it starts in the schools, or it starts.
Kurt, I want to cut with you here for just a moment. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties, and I want to make sure we get you on a secure line so we can pick your brain a little bit more about rugby.
Okay.
Can you hear me better?
I can hear you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and see if we can get you on a more secure line. We're going to bat it back and forth here for just a minute, and we'll try to reconnect with Kurt Mockenhop. So basically what Kurt was telling us was that they have game development officers throughout the state in Roanoke, Springfield, teams in Springfield, but game development officers in Roanoke, Virginia Beach, the Tidewater area, obviously with teams in Loudoun, an 8-team league now in this Northern Virginia area. They're hoping to follow lacrosse's blueprint and become an official league down the road.
Well, BJ, now you've talked to Kurt, and maybe I can pick your brain before I can pick his. Is my perception of rugby, and I'm sure most people's perception of rugby, is a hard-nosed football without pads, big burly men, with broken noses, and I mean, how do they go about kind of fighting that perception? Because I know it's an actual sport. And
I got a chance to go out to Nova U19's practice earlier this week, and that's a team made up of 10 different high schoolers, 10 different high schools. And 2 middle schools even. So it's a club unit, but really what it is, it's a bunch of guys that are, have played other high school sports. Mm-hmm. The mold is broken by one guy, a guy named Gareth Willott, rather. He's the best player in the league. They call him the poster child. Mm-hmm. His dad's from England. Mm-hmm. He's knows all the terminology. Coach Mike Murphy is the coach over there, and he calls him the poster child. He says, this is the kind of guy that we hope down the road will kind of infiltrate the league and become kind of what we rest our hat on. We are joined again on the line by Kurt Mockenhop. Kurt, can you hear me?
I can. Thanks for having me back on.
Okay, Kurt. So Paul was kind of picking my brain about the league a little bit. Why don't you give us, as quick as you can, the best description of what the league is and what it hopes to be?
Well, we decided to start the league this season, this spring, with the existing teams in Northern Virginia and adding a few more teams which are also Northern Virginia based. We have 8 boys teams and 4 girls teams spanning Fairfax County, Alexandria, Loudoun County, and Frederick County. And again, with our game development officers around the state, the long-term goal is to grow the game into regions, pitting each of these regions against each other in a chase to the state championship. But for year one, it's Northern Virginia teams based only. We're having our state championship in Northern Virginia.
Kurt, I was just talking with BJ about this, and kind of the perception of rugby is a kind of a violent sport, almost a football without pads, and maybe something that parents might be a little cautious about having their children play. How do you go about kind of breaking that stereotype and showing them that this is a sport that is safe and their kids should play?
Well, it's definitely a contact sport, but you can point to lacrosse and ice hockey as also being contact sports, and of course football. But the way I like to explain it is, when you break it down, is look at the tackle. The purpose of the tackle in rugby is it's not an impact tackle. You don't have equipment on. Your opponent doesn't have equipment on, so it's not a put your face in the numbers of the other guy. It's to essentially hold him up and try to get the ball from him. Hold him up and rip the ball out. So you don't have that crushing impact kind of tackle that you do in, let's say, football. So there is a purpose to the tackle. It's to hold the guy up or wrestle him to the ground, but it's to get the ball. And rugby is about constant movement. The only time play stops is when the ball has been killed or goes out of bounds. So the idea is to keep the ball in constant movement. So there's actually less physicality than in some other sports. Everybody has to sign a waiver when they play. Everybody has to have a physical like you do in the VHSL and the Visa leagues before you play. You're checked out, and yes, there's some degree of injury because it's a contact sport. But there's been some studies done in places like Ohio State Medical School and Harvard comparing the various contact sports, and what it comes up with is rugby is somewhere in the middle. It's not the most has the highest percentage of injuries or the highest degree of violence, but not the least, somewhere in the middle.
Drop some numbers before Eric gets a chance to ask you a question, just to show the folks at home that there is a large amount of interest in rugby in the D.C. metro area. There was a recent study done by erugbynews.com that of the 777 high school teams or club teams in the states in this D.C. metro area, 41 of the 98 teams in the Mid-Atlantic area come from our metro area, that with, of course, Rugby Virginia's 8 accounting for the ones from Virginia. Also, you look at private school powers like Gonzaga, coached by Lee Kelly over there, and they've got 150 kids within 4 teams within that program. So there is a lot of interest. Eric Gilmore wants to round out this question and answer session with Potomac Rugby Unions and Rugby Virginia's Kurt Mockenhop.
Well, I guess I have a two-part question, almost a compound question. You mentioned Title IX. To me, wouldn't this be the antithesis of Title IX, a male-oriented sport? I know. Before you answer that, I know there's a large amount of interest, especially at the collegiate level, on a club basis. But my question is more so, why rugby? Why, especially with lacrosse just getting VHSL sanction a couple years ago, would rugby go ahead and trump crew, which is not a sponsored sport, and also ice hockey, and then some outlying sports like Episcopal, who actually has a squash team? But why would rugby trump those other teams?
I don't think it's necessarily going to trump it, but I think that it gives another option to kids out there, and particularly we have to teach athletic directors and football coaches that rugby can be their friend. There is a number of ADs across the country who are now they now have rugby as in their list of sports, and they have worked ways so that rugby as a spring sport, as long as it's played in the spring versus in the fall, can be a good complement to football. In fact, Jesuit High School from Sacramento, California, which just won the school-based USA Rugby High School Championship over the weekend in Pittsburgh, had 11 of their 15 starters were varsity high school football players. So they were playing football in the fall and rugby in the spring, and using rugby as a training conference for football.
Seem to be having some technical difficulties again with the line. Kurt Mockenhop, want to thank you for joining us here on this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. Hope the folks at home got a chance to find out more about rugby in the D.C. metro area. If you want to know more, go to fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Guys, let's jump into that sport of lacrosse, which we've been, of course, got a lot to talk about with this state tournament, the Triple Edge Lacrosse Report. Let's jump right into that state tournament bracket where Chantilly is a team that is still undefeated right there. You see them in the championship game with Oakton. That is not a surprise whatsoever. Paul Frummel, you've gotten a chance to see a lot of these games between these teams this year. They've played quite a bit. It's the Chargers and the Cougars facing off for a state title.
Well, they definitely seem like Chantilly and Oakton were destined to meet in the state championship game. The two teams have met 3 times already this year, with Chantilly winning all 3. They first beat Oakton during the regular season in the Concord District 9-3. They then beat them in the district finals 9-7. You can see the gap closing a little bit. And then in the region finals, the Chargers won again 8-6. So you can see that the Oakton Cougars have been closing the gap. They feel like they feel like they can be able to compete with the Chargers, and you can see the reel right there showing their previous game.
All right, so this is the region championship where the Chargers and the Cougars went head-to-head. In a second, you'll get a chance to see such an incredible finish by Kevin O'Neill, who went over his shoulder to win the game. They were all tied up at that point. As you see the Cougars' valiant effort, at one point this had been so back and forth. There were 6 ties. No team had led by more than 2 until Kevin O'Neill went right in front of the mouth of the goal and put one away over his shoulder. We're leading up to that. Both goalies were great. Derek Kagaris from Chantilly put up 16 saves. So what a great effort for the Chargers on the night, and the Cougars both as they went back and forth. Great. There's always this motto at Chantilly: one more pass, one more dish, one more goal. They're such a team-oriented mindset for that team at 19-0. It's going to be hard to see that anyone might be able to step in and stop that, but Oakton thinks that they can certainly do that. Here's the over-the-shoulder finish, which was absolutely incredible. Folks, that won the game for the Chargers, and to have the gall to take that shot. I looked at Kevin Broderick, the coach of the Chantilly Chargers, after the game, and I said, wow, the gall to take that shot at that moment in the game. But an assistant coach stepped in and said, you know what, though? That was really his only option. That was the right shot to take. So it wasn't a guy hot dogging on a big stage. It was a guy actually doing what he had to do to win the game.
Well, that's experience, knowing that that's the shot you have to take. And then that's confidence, knowing that you can make that shot. So, again, and that's something that the Chargers have this year. They have the experience, and my goodness, they better have the confidence.
Speaking of experience, Eric, these teams have faced off quite a bit. Let's jump into the graphic and show the results. Oakton and Chantilly will face off for a state championship. Eric, though, here are the past results.
Yeah, we see Chantilly dominate Oakton in that first match, but probably the best game, if not the region championship, was the Concord District Championship, in Chantilly downing Oakton 9-7. And then they came back, which we just saw Kevin Broderick and company getting the Northern Region wins to stay undefeated on the year, 8-6. But the thing about it is, obviously, we just saw the highlights. That game was very, very close. I'd say what wasn't close was any of the state tournament games thus far. We kind of penciled in the Northern Region and the premier region within the entire state of Virginia. But these were not close games at all. You look in the semifinal games, Chantilly winning by 5, Oakton winning by 11 in those 2 games. So it's been a straight path. These 2 teams about to face off for the 4th time this year.
Let's take one last look at the state championship bracket, as the Chargers are the team to beat. They go into that with an undefeated record on a dream season, 19-0. You see them against Oakton. Oakton has not beaten the Chargers now in 4 meetings. Can they pull off the win? They were close in the region final. It would be the state championship that would matter most to Tony Gray.
Yeah, because Tony Gray announced to his team recently that this will be his last season. The state final game will be his last game. And Gray, obviously, with a great career at Oakton, planning on leaving this year, and that's got to give the Cougars a confidence boost to send their coach out on top.
Can the Cougars win one for Coach Tony Gray on his way out? We'll find out more as they play it out, guys. That's why they play the games, right? No matter if they've beaten them 3 or 4 times or not, the Cougars are going to have something to say about it before it's all said and done. All right, speaking of brackets, in just a moment, Robinson girls soccer coach Jim Rike is going to be joining us on the FSN hotline. We're going to get a chance to secure him on our FSN hotline and talk with him about a great season, 18-1. They haven't lost since March 28th. But before we get to girls soccer, as we're getting him on the horn just now, let's get in to boys soccer, guys. Let's jump into this state championship bracket. Thomas Dale right up at the top. That's a team that has given some teams some trouble this year. And Robinson boys hope they won't be the next victim. Osborne fell early. Paul, walk us through the rest of the bracket.
You can see there that Deep Run beat Osborne Park to take the semifinal round there. Kecoughtan will face Deep Run in the semifinals. So there's your bracket, one of the few brackets that's filled out up to the semifinals. Thomas Dale will take on Robinson, and Deep Run playing Kecoughtan.
Stonebridge drops in the first round. Ronnie Shaban, not enough to get that team over the hump. They were looking for a state championship. Had a great team. They had a lot of chances. They just couldn't finish them off.
Yeah, best team, best record in school history. First time they've won the region as well. So, or got to the region final. So, great season for Coach Randy May.
And Robinson hoping to improve on their season. The champs headed through to what could be a finals appearance if they can get by Thomas Dale. Will it be either Kecoughtan or Deep Run on the other side of the bracket? Still a lot to be figured out on that front. As we jump into girls soccer now, the girls soccer bracket is just as interesting for Robinson. Could it be a year of 2 soccer championships for the Rams? This is the girls soccer team that has not lost since March 28th. They're 18-1. Their only loss to Stonebridge 14 games ago, so they're on quite a streak. They'll take on Woodbridge. Woodbridge took them 2 days to win the game because of rainouts and rescheduling. So they won today, 1-0. Frank W. Cox battered Westfield 4-0, but in Westfield's defense, Westfield was without Heather Hovanesian, who was lost during the region tournament to a knee injury, and Bo Vizivakul, who was also out with a concussion in that Frank W. Cox loss. So, you lose your 2 best players. Who's to say you couldn't go further if you might have had them, but that's why they play the games. Battlefield takes a victory over Mills Godwin. Sahar Aflaki improves her season to 32 goals. That's a sophomore, guys, so Battlefield will have her for the next 2 years. And Coach Jim Rike, if he's able to get by Woodbridge in this next round, could see Aflaki in the championship game, or will it be Frank W. Cox, which has dropped in the last 2 championship games? Well, for that knowledge, we bring on the man himself with 442 career victories in 28 seasons, Coach Jim Rike. Coach, want to thank you for joining us on the FSN hotline.
No problem.
All right, Jim, so you got Woodbridge up next. They're a team with a girl named Kristen Liebert that scored 29 goals this season. They've got a great defense with 12 shutouts. And knowing you and what you do over there at Robinson, you're going to have full scouting reports in print for every girl before the game. What's their scouting report going to say about Woodbridge?
Well, I actually went out and had a chance to see them play today, the second half. And you're right, they are very quick up front, and they've got a solid back line. Their goalie's not bad. I think probably I saw some areas that we can focus on attacking, but as I've told the girls, I said they have a history of doing well in tournaments. They, aside from Kellum, they're the only other team that's won a state championship outside of the northern region, so you have to respect that the program is as a storied program that's done well. Even on their website, it says a battle between 2 Northern Virginia powerhouses. And you look at their record; they've done very well this year. So it won't be an easy game.
Coach, your team obviously also familiar with tournaments, with the majority of your team playing on club teams throughout the whole year, and even sometimes during the school year. Can you kind of talk about that, because they've played plenty of weekend tournaments. They know the drill. They have all the experience. Can you kind of talk about the experience you bring to a state tournament?
Well, I think by the time you get to the state tournament, it's not a matter of you're not going to be doing anything new. You don't confuse the kids by throwing in anything that changes the routine. Stick to what's worked for you and just, basically polish things up. You can't go through a lot of hard practices because there isn't a lot of recovery time. We really have what we call a postseason routine when we start the tournaments. There's just 3 or 4 basic things we do at every practice. Obviously, penalty kicks is one of them. Set pieces is another. Focus a little bit on shooting, maybe refine some things the kids might not be doing as well as they could. A lot of stretching, and that's it. Try not to get anybody hurt, because the important thing is getting your best kids on the field the night of the game.
Coach Rike, BJ mentioned 440 plus wins over almost a 30-year career. The fact that I think it was either the 9th or 10th region championship this season. You were just named to the VHSL Hall of Fame. How big of an honor was that for you? And take me through the process when you found out.
Well, it's a tremendous honor because they only take about 8 people. It's 7 or 8 people a year, and I wasn't aware of this. We've had a lot of great coaches go through Robinson. I think I am maybe the 4th. Ed Henry and John Epperly are 2 that come to mind that are in the Hall of Fame. And I worked with both of them. I was an assistant coach with Ed on the football team, and John Epperly's assistant coach for a number of years with the wrestling team. And I know the kind of coaches they were, and to be put, on a level of them, it's quite an honor. I knew my athletic director had mentioned, when I told him that I was going to be retiring as a teacher this year, that they talked about the nomination process, and of course I'm on the executive committee for the Coaches Association, and I know some of the guys, but they never said anything to me about how it was going, who had been elected, and they just said we've got a lot of good people. And initially, when the Virginia coach came out, they had listed 3 or 4 people, and I wasn't in it. So it was more of a surprise when I got the letter because I wasn't expecting it. I thought maybe I'd been passed over, and maybe next year I would get it. So when the letter first came, I thought initially, when I saw it, it was just a notice about a coaches meeting. So I tossed it on the table and didn't even really open it because I usually get 3 or 4 of those a year, and it was just telling us the date of the next coaches meeting. And then a day or 2 later, my wife she gets upset when we get a bunch of stuff piled on the kitchen table. She's like, I can never keep it clean. So she was going through everything and opened it up and says, I don't think this is a coaches meeting. You better come over here and read this. So it was a very pleasant surprise.
Absolutely, Coach. You got a lot of great players this year and a young team as well. Walk us through some of your stars. Just quickly touch on Catherine Yount in goal for you, how big she's been, headed to William & Mary. And if you can touch on Leanne Baxter and Audrey Berry up front, and your defender, Allie Heck, a couple of stars among many at Robinson. That's
true. We are kind of a mixture of young and old, but less old this year than in the past. We only have 2 senior starters because our other 2 seniors both went down with season-ending injuries in the first 2 scrimmages of the year. Catherine has developed, from a kid who was just thrown into the goal as a sophomore. I knew she had potential, but we were kind of had to shove the time schedule forward because the girl that had played ahead of her the previous year had been All-State. And unbeknownst to us, she had decided to have shoulder surgery right before the season started. So we went in expecting one goalie and ended up with another goalie. So I think that was tremendous experience for her. And she continued to develop last year. And then, of course, this year, she just really has blossomed as a great player in the back. She's very calm. One thing I like about her, and I've noticed, as a former goalie myself, my son was a goalie, I've always liked keepers that kept their cool, didn't yell or scream at their players when goals were scored. She just kind of lets things kind of slide, is very encouraging to the kids around her. She's got a really dry sense of humor, which the kids appreciate. Allie, and of course our entire back line has done a good job for us this year. Monica Crimmin on the left is often overlooked, but Allie is a tremendous asset because of her speed. Most of the time teams will put the fastest players they have up top to use as attacking players. And Allie's the kind of kid that can match any forward that we've met so far this year. speed for speed. And she's a very smart kid, and she stays very calm. So it's very hard to beat her. Our midfield line, we've got, Brooke Curtis is a very strong kid. Our attacking center mid, Kristen Smith, one of our captains, is also going to William & Mary this year with Catherine. So William & Mary picked up 2 of our kids this year. And up top, well, Leanne and Audrey and Jensen Smith, the 3 of them, there's an old saying that speed burns. And those 3 kids have all got speed to burn. Leanne's extremely fast. Audrey's very, very tactical and technical, with her game. And those kids, but especially Leanne and Audrey, we've noticed a lot because of what they've done in postseason. Jensen still has made a contribution. She's just now getting back into the rut because she missed 10 days with a real bad concussion. And so she was out for a bit, but she's also been a major contributor for us up top.
In a rain-soaked game against First Colonial, Leanne Baxter scored a goal and assisted on 2 goals and on 3 of your first 5 corner kick tries. So Audrey Berry with 18 goals on the season, a great tandem up front. You add Jensen back into the mix. It's going to be tough to stop the Rams. You guys are on a bit of a streak. I wrote a little bit about you last night. Don't want to change too much up. Can you talk a little bit about any of that little superstitious stuff you got going on, trying to keep the 14-game streak and push it to 15 and 16, if it is 16 by the time you get a state championship?
Yeah, I am kind of a superstitious guy. And most everybody I know is. I think there was an article, I think even you guys had an article in the Post recently about the superstitions of different athletes and different coaches. Don't like to change the routine. If something works, we just kind of keep it that way. And I guess it's funny because it's kind of carried over to the girls. They all have this certain little routines they have to do before the start of the game. Certain kids have to shake hands with certain kids. Certain kids have to bump hips with somebody, or they have to do high five. And you get kind of superstitious because you don't want to change any little thing because it worked the last time. And I know you guys had mentioned the thing about my chair, and I actually had thought about trying out the new chair, and both of my assistant coaches, well, 2 of my assistant coaches are former players, and they both looked at me and went, no. So it kind of spreads as time goes on.
Well, Coach, hopefully as time goes on, nothing will change for you guys as you've been on a bit of a tear. Can Robinson win their first state championship since 2002? We'll find out this Friday and Saturday at Westfield High School. Coach, we'll see you out there on the fields.
Yes, sure you will.
All right, thanks. Good luck. All
Thank
right,
you.
guys. So if you want to catch more soccer analysis, go to fairfaxsportsnetwork.com and check out an all-new Fast Break where I got a chance to break down both brackets, boys and girls soccer. And speaking of soccer, as we round it out, guys, Robinson alive in both boys and girls. You think the Rams can make it 2 tournament titles in one weekend?
Well, this was a team that in the beginning of the year we thought had what it takes to get to that state tournament final to win a state title, and they haven't changed my mind.
All right, Paul Frummel, your mind doesn't change when it comes to softball because that's a sport you love. So why would you change your mind? You love the smaller mound and the bigger ball and more. So why don't you walk us through your favorite sports bracket here in the state tournament?
Well, everybody knows that I love anything involving a diamond, and I love softball. And the big story is Westfield there. You see there at the bottom. They lose to Woodside. I'll get to the region tournament success in a minute. But deeper on in Loudoun Valley, we don't have a final there yet. Herndon losing to Hickory. And Herndon and both Westfield matched up against Eastern Region teams. And Hickory was 14-1 entering that game. And Woodside was right there with them, each having 24-1, each having more than 20 wins on the year. So bad draw for Northern Region squads. They don't get past the first round of the state tournament.
Herndon got a great gem back in Katie Reinex, who missed a lot of the year, and they went into their first state tournament ever in school history. Unable to get the job done against a tough Hickory team. Those beach teams, that Chesapeake area puts out some beasts as well.
But I want to break down kind of the season that Westfield had, capped off by the Bulldogs' first ever Northern Region title. Now Westfield came into this year. They started with six freshmen. They now have 7 freshmen on the team, 2 sophomores, 2 juniors, 3 seniors, only 3 seniors, and 7 freshmen. coming in, and now fans of the show that like to
There are
TiVo it and keep it for years know that last year around this time I was raving about Linda Pirro, the hurler for the Bulldogs. She graduated, Alhian graduated, a bunch of great players graduated from this Westfield team.
And everybody thought, Paul, with those kids gone, I mean, you lose a big pitcher like Pirro, and Heon's a great hitter. They thought, that's it. That's a wrap. They ain't going to get it done.
Well, when I talked to Dean Farrington before the season, he said it's going to be a circus out there. He had 4 or 5 pitchers that thought they could pitch, and he said, well, their definition of pitching and my definition of pitching may be a little different. So that's what worried him, was pitching. Well, against Herndon in the Northern Region Final, they used 3 different pitchers. All of them were freshmen. Those freshmen didn't allow a run until the 7th inning. When things got a little dicey, they allowed 3 runs. Still stayed on top. 3 freshman pitchers they used in the Northern Region Final. Their first Northern Region Final. When I talked to Farrington after the game, he said, I knew we had a really good freshman class. He's worked with these kids through, club organizations. He knows these kids. He knows the area. So he had an idea of what they had, and what they had was a team that could win a Northern Region title.
Certainly they did. I mean, what is interesting to me is the fact that the Northern Region couldn't get out of the first round. It's almost like girls basketball. There's a lot of really good teams, but something happens in the region tournament. I mean, you look at Centerville, Langley, and I'm still screaming about Yorktown, who didn't even make it out of the first round of the region tournament, but none of those teams got to the second round of the state tournament. Obviously, congratulations to Westfield on a great year, but still somewhat disappointing the fact that as many good teams as there were, top to bottom, and elite teams, that they couldn't go farther.
Well, you could tell when Herndon and Westfield made it to the Northern Region Final. These were teams that went 7-5 in the Concord District this year, and there was no real dominant team. Centerville during the regular season, yes, they were dominant. South County was dominant as well, but they couldn't even make it in the later rounds of the Northern Region Tournament. So when you see Westfield and Herndon, you go, congratulations to these teams, but when they hit the state tournament, and that's what happened.
Obviously, a tough season on the Northern Region. Let's round out the softball bracket before we jump out of it. Take one last peek at it. Deep Run and Loudoun Valley still to be decided. Valley could be the last local beast besides Battlefield still standing. Valley, a team out from near Lovettsville over there, all the way out way west near Notre Dame, all the way out there at Paul Frummel. Hickory gets by Herndon.
Hickory again, so you see that, probably seeing Loudoun Valley playing Hickory. We don't know yet. Loudoun Valley, part of that Loudoun County softball scene that includes Broad Run, who is a number 2 ranked team in the nation, and Stonebridge, who had a great run in the Northern Region Tournament. So great softball being played in Loudoun County, Loudoun Valley hopefully advancing.
Battlefield there, a team from the Northwest region, has had a great season. They've got some great pitching over there. And Woodside, we'll see who comes out of that bracket to take on the other side. Of course, that's how they play tournaments, Paul Frummel. Okay, so there you go.
Thanks for breaking it down for me.
Yeah, really, some great analysis there. We'll see who comes out of one side to play the other side. It's absolutely incredible.
If you win, you advance.
Right, well, yeah, that's why they play the game.
All right.
Anything else? Eric, want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I have several news and notes, so thank you all for breaking it down.
Sure.
This is obviously turnover time, coaching turnover time. I mean, you look in the last couple of weeks, they've been all over the place. Right now, just going in girls basketball, WNL has hired Angie Kelly. She was an assistant last year. Wakefield has hired Marcia Richardson, who won a district title in the mid-'90s and was an assistant at West Potomac last year. Westpo announced today that Jefferson coach Michael Weber is going to be their new head coach. Also, Lee confirmed Harold Jackson is their new girls basketball coach. He's been a lead assistant over there for the last 8 years. Also, Hayfield hired a field hockey coach, Ginger White's daughter, actually, another White. So that will also happen. At TC Williams, Scott Grossi will leave, and he's going to Baltimore. He's going to relocate after leading the team to the first regional berth in 10 years. Also, the softball coach will leave as well. So plenty of coaching turnover right now going on across the Northern Region.
Well, some more news and notes for you there. Eric Gilmore joining us, dropping his knowledge there on the coaching carousel. You can get more about that at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com because we are on the web at, well, believe it or not, at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. It's really hard, guys. The audio, video, and more. I want to thank our teammates CCI Screen Printing for all your screen printing needs at 703-978-0257 and on the web at cciscreenprinting.com. You can find an endless summer of lacrosse. I'm still looking for an endless summer. It's incredible. I mean, if that really could happen, it'd be great. Triple Edge Lacrosse, www.tripleedgelax.com for all your lacrosse needs and more. I want to thank all the Northern Region knuckleheads that braved the crazy commute home and made the taping of the Fairfax Sports Report. Eric Gilmore made it with us. Paul Frummelt made it. I made it. Monica Moore got through it. We all got through it, and you got through it with us here on this soggy episode of the Fairfax Sports Report.